Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerners Northern Garden. So today I'm going to be doing some garden chores, so a lot of this video is just going to be silent just because I need to get through things. We have a beautiful overcast day today. There's a breeze, which also wouldn't make it great for video recording, and it's probably like high 60s right now, so this is the perfect day to get a ton of garden chores done, as many as I can before the heat returns later this week. So I have the blueberries that I'm going to be pulling up today, and I'll record that process, but I'm replacing them with these gorgeous Wintergreen Boxwoods that I got from the Monrovia sale at Lowe's a few weeks ago. I had been watching these all season, and I had been basically begging the people to give them to me on discount simply because they've been sitting there and no one's purchased them. I ended up getting them 50% off, which is excellent, and these are huge. So these are several years old already. It is very difficult to find a boxwood this size anywhere at any of the nurseries that I go to that aren't like outrageously expensive. So I got these for about $115 a piece. So there's two of them. They were a pair. They're going to replace each of these blueberries right under these limelight hydrangeas. And then after I finish this, I'm going to get started on working on the vegetable garden and cleaning up some of those vegetables, pulling out that tomato I mentioned in the last video. There's a lot of weeds in the mulch there. It needs to be remulched, but I'm not going to be doing that today. I'm going to be focusing mostly on pulling out my kale and lettuces that have just been there and I haven't paid any attention to for the past couple months, and getting the garden prepared to plant some fall crops. So I'll probably be starting some kale again from seed. I really love kale. A lot of people don't. I find it even when it's a little bitter and got a little summer heat to it, it's still okay with lots of ranch dressing on it. But right now I'm just gonna try and get as much cleaned up as I can while today is nice. So follow along. One thing about these boxwoods, I do have it sitting in my gorilla cart, which I filled with water. I've had these for about 2 weeks now, and they've been in their container. At Lowe's, they would typically be watered more than one time a day, but I am not able to water them in the morning, and it's been so hot and they've been sitting back here almost in full sun that I want to make sure the root balls not become hydrophobic before I stick them in the ground. So I'm going to let them soak a little bit in this gorilla cart in their container that's full of water for 15 to 30 minutes or so before I put them in the ground. In the meantime, I'm going to begin digging up this blueberry behind me, and then I'll probably go ahead and dig up the other blueberry as well. And then I'll set the other boxwood in here to soak up some water too before I put it in the ground. As I've mentioned in other videos, I'm pulling these blueberries out of the ground because my general soil in the garden has a high pH, and I want to be able to control that a little better in a raised bed. So I'm putting them in the 𝗣𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢 garden bed I assembled several videos ago. And you'll notice when I pull them up, I'll show you, these still have blueberries on them, but because they've been suffering a bit, some of the leaves are missing. It's not a very full shrub, and the berries are super, super tiny. So to be able to get bigger berries and allow these plants to become more productive and happy, I'm just putting them in a raised bed. So we're gonna begin. So I think you can see a little bit what I'm dealing with back here. As I mentioned, I have really heavy clay soil. And so what I'm gonna do before I put this boxwood in there, since it was still kind of expensive, I'm gonna fill this hole with water and see how quickly it drains. I don't expect I'll have a problem. Boxwoods tend to do really good in my landscape, despite the fact that I have clay soil, even in areas that aren't draining very well. So I'm going to fill this up with water and let it sit, and I'm going to move on to the other boxwood. This part of the bed, I mentioned I amended the bed around my patio significantly after I put in the shrubs last year. This side of the bed was mine. The other side is where all the amendment happened because a lot of the soil here wasn't as bad as it was. So I'm going to fill this up with water, see how quickly it drains, and then I'll come back to the issue. So you can see where I mended the soil right here. It's almost as if it's like potting soil, which is what I really looked for when I was redoing this bed. So this boxwood, this other one that I have, after I let it soak for 15 minutes or so, I'm going to put it directly in the ground. I need to dig the hole a little bigger first, so let me do that. All right, everyone, I am done for the day. It was a great day to be outside. It's shortly after 12 o'clock and I got a ton done. It's still overcast. I could still come out here and probably do a ton, but I want to enjoy the rest of my weekend before I go back to work tomorrow. So I'm gonna show you what all I got done. So I got both Wintergreen Boxwoods planted. The soil right here was amazing simply because this is where I had amended this entire bed, as I mentioned. So I had no issues here, went right in the ground, pulled up the blueberry, and transplanted those. I may have to trim back some of these perennials, but I like this kind of look. It's kind of very full, and in the winter when there's no blooms on any of the hydrangeas and the perennials are gone, that'll give just a nice corner winter interest here along with this emerald green arborvitae. So we did the same thing over this way. We got the other one planted. Now, because this one had a little more clay soil issue, I did plant it a little high. I think the draining's gonna be fine. I think I mentioned that boxwoods do pretty well here, even though we have heavy clay soil, and sometimes there are drainage issues. But since I planted it a little high, it should be perfectly fine. I'll keep an eye on it, see if I start having any issues, and if I do, I will consider moving it out, removing some of this extra clay soil around it and replacing it. So I got these blueberries planted. I don't remember the name of these on the ends that were not doing great in the ground. They might be blueberry buckle, I'm not completely sure. But the middle one I got from Sam's Club 2 years ago, and it's not grown very much because it's been in a tiny container, and this past winter it got ate down almost to the ground, I think, by a squirrel. But this is one of my favorite. It's called Pink Lemonade, and it has this really beautiful new pink growth that then turns green and it gets berries all over it. So I've got enough room to stick right on the ends, 2 more of the bushel and berry series, and I'm looking for a specific variety that I'm gonna find and then put in there. I may have to order online. The bushel and berry series of blueberries stay relatively compact, so this will be a nice little hedge of blueberries and hopefully be a long time before it has any shade in this area and produce a ton of berries for me. As I mentioned, these still have berries on here, but they're so tiny I haven't bothered eating them. I was just gonna leave them for the birds. I did add some 𝗬𝗟𝗏 holly tone to the bed, you may have saw. That wasn't necessarily to fertilize these, although since those were looking kind of rough, it would be good if they put on some new green growth before the season's out. And then I added some soil acidifier. I probably did not have enough of that. I didn't measure it, but it said roughly 2.5 cups per blueberry plant. And since I didn't have much left, I just poured it all in there. So I'll pick up some more of that and add a little more because I want to make sure this soil is pretty acidic to make these blueberries happy. And the biggest transformation of all is my vegetable gardening space. So I used a couple tools I want to tell you about. One specific brand is called the Rogue Hoe. I think they're both by Rogue Hoe, but one of them is kind of a winged hoe, I think is also what they're called, and they have sharp edges. It's a triangle and there's sharp edges all around the sides, and you basically slide it just under the soil and it cuts all the plants off at the root, which is really great to clean up an area like this. I had a lot of weeds in the area. You can see I got most of them up. Some will turn brown, hopefully, that I got all of them, and if I didn't, I'll come in here and pull up anything that's left. One of the reasons this area was easier to clean up is because there is landscape fabric under here, but there's 3 years of mulch on top of it, which is broken down into this really great soil. So I need to either move this soil out of the aisles of the beds and put it in the beds itself, or I need to put down some thicker, more rough mulch down. Not like the mulch I put in the flower beds out here. I need something a little more coarse, like a pine bark potentially, just so it will help inhibit some of that weed growth, because right now weeds are just prolific because it's actually very nutritious, broken down mulch, as you can see here. I pulled out all the kale. I did have a root ball left here. My garbage can this week is completely full, so I got everything in there that I could. Anything else will have to wait till next week. A lot of that stuff would have been nice to compost, but I also had some tomatoes that were very diseased. And so I removed a lot of that foliage and threw it in the bag as well, and I didn't want to put that in the compost and perpetuate any diseases that may have been with these tomatoes. Some of you may have gasped when I cut down this basil as hard as I did. This is a mazel basil by Proven Winners, and it gets absolutely massive. And I didn't need any basil right now, and there's still a ton on there. It just needed to be cut back significantly because it was taking over all of these coneflowers right here. These are the ones I winter sowed, and I didn't have anywhere to put them. When I pulled them out of their winter sowed container, I stuck them directly in the raised bed to kind of grow on. I will plant some of these out in my new flower bed spaces that I made later this fall. Otherwise, this space, although some of the cucumbers are still looking kind of rough, it's cleaned up so much more, and I can start planting some fall crops in here. I greatly trimmed back this crimson flame honeysuckle. It's blooming again, which is nice, but it's also a little diseased, got a little fungus or something else going on. Since it has given me so many problems this year, it is gorgeous. I mean, these blooms are beautiful. The bees are all over it here, but I just don't know if I like it in this space. It kind of takes over the tomatoes a little bit, shrouds my boxwoods down there. I may be completely removing it and throwing it away, since I did have a lot of trouble with it. I may give it another season, but it's getting kind of wild for this space, I think. Let me know what you think below. Don't know where else I would move it in the garden. It was not inexpensive. I think it was $70 2 or 3 years ago from Lowe's. It was pretty big when I got it, but it struggled for the first 2 years. This is the first year it's done any good. So maybe I might give it another chance next year. We'll see. But either way, it's a little wild, and I'm not sure exactly how to control it, and I don't think you really can control honeysuckle. That's the point of it. So I might be removing it. I don't know. Got to think about it. I got a nice harvest of tomatoes down there from the 𝗤𝗦𝗗𝗘𝗢 tomato I removed. This is the first year that I've really had any tomato disease problems. I think it stems from when we got all of that rain a few weeks ago. It rained almost every day for over a week, and I think it just stayed too wet without any airflow because it was so thick in this area. So I completely removed the 𝗤𝗦𝗗𝗘𝗢 and cut off almost all the brown foliage that I could find. There's still some here and there that should probably be removed, but I'm going to leave it. Most of that's just dying leaves, dried up leaves anyway. And I also removed the calendula that I had down here, as well as the marigold, simply because I was afraid it was also blocking that airflow, and I needed these tomatoes to continue growing the rest of the year and be as disease-free as possible. So I wanted as much airflow as possible there. And finally, in this area, I did run the drip to this oak leaf hydrangea and my redbud up there. I just connected it to this existing drip line right here, just cut in and put a T. You saw me run it down here, cover it up. I stuck two 2-gallon-per-hour emitters on this oak leaf hydrangea. That's pretty much my standard configuration for all shrubs, 2-gallon-per-hour emitters. That's simply because I rarely run my beds more than 30 minutes at a time, and if I have 2-gallon-per-hour emitters, that emits at least 2 gallons of water each time I water these shrubs. So I did the same thing to the redbud, 2-gallon-per-hour emitters, and then I just ended the line right here, and this will continue on to the other bed. I did put a cutoff valve here, but I will remove that when I connect it to the rest of the bed that's going to go along the fence. I simply put this here a lot of times when I'm terminating an area, so if I need to open it and flush the line out, it's a good place and a good area of the system to flush the line out to make sure nothing's plugging up my emitters. So I've turned on the irrigation just to kind of flush some water out of that new line to make sure no mulch got in there. so we don't have any emitters plugged up. I'll let it run for a couple minutes to make sure all of that's out of there, and then I will close it off and it will continue watering this area and giving these trees and this oak leaf hydrangea some good water. Now that the system is pressurized, you can see this emitter is putting out water here, hopefully. Perfect. I did the same thing to this red bud that was struggling. I put two 2-gallon-per-hour emitters in there, so hopefully that will allow it to start struggling less. It can get watered every day now. I don't have to worry about dragging a whole hose. I could even run water twice a day while I'm at work if I needed to. It's putting out some new beautiful growth, so it's going to be all right. It just lost some of that foliage when it didn't have quite a good enough root system to support it. And that's it, guys. I hope you were able to get outside this weekend and do some stuff in your garden. I know this was a very successful and productive weekend here in my garden. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, drop them below. And remember, like, subscribe, and in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Bye.